بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Alhamdulillah. So grateful to be here and to be part, at least this weekend, of a masjid that has a real sense of purpose. One of the reasons why I find a space like this inspiring, a real sense of purpose. Not only purpose, but values as well, articulating exactly what are the principles of this space and where are we going. But just like how as people of La ilaha illallah, our relationship with Allah, our servitude to Allah remains theoretical and remains simply theoretical until we are actually in the service of our fellow human beings in some regard. If you study fiqh, if you study the traditional Islamic jurisprudence, you'll note that the fiqh is divided into two areas, fiqh al-ibadat or fiqh al-mu'amalat. The fiqh, the rulings on acts of worship, how to pray, how to fast properly, that kind of thing. And then the fiqh of how to deal properly with people, business transactions, politics, real estate, ethics, all of these things. And which do you think is the longer section of the fiqh book? It's the mu'amalat, right? And so until we live this deen in service to our fellow human being, our service to Allah, our servitude to Allah is simply theoretical. And similarly, as long as the community has a mission, but it stops there, that mission is just theoretical. A communal mission rests upon every individual within that community having their own personal mission, knowing where they fit, knowing what I'm doing in this community, how I am a piece of the puzzle, how I contribute, what I'm taking initiative on. And so that's what I'm here today to speak about the importance of a personal mission, what that means, why it's important, and speak a little bit about my personal history in that regard. So if you could raise your hand if you were here yesterday. Can I just get a sense in the room? Okay. So about half a dozen hands. Okay, mashallah. So just because I knew that there might be some people for this first hour, which will be somewhat of a review from yesterday. I knew there wouldn't be complete overlap, but some overlap. So what I'm doing today is an abridged version, inshallah, of what I spoke about last night, for those who weren't able to be here last night. But given that I figured a few people might have been here both times, I wanted to tell a few different stories, maybe add a bit of different content so it's not just boring for those who've already been here. So last night, I told a story about my origin story in regards to this content in a way. Coming into Islam with a real sense of mission in terms of my career. And then because of being a Muslim, having to give up on that career aspiration. And then being in a kind of state of limbo. Not having a discrete, distinct sense of where I was going in life and what I was doing with my time. Other than a general commitment to learning prophetic knowledge and serving the Muslim community. And so, alhamdulillah, that was a decent intention. And so it carried me through, alhamdulillah, receiving a few ijazahs in Quran memorization and teaching the spiritual path and in the basics of fiqh and aqidah. So received permissions from teachers in that regard to teach these essential subjects. Gained fluency in Arabic, alhamdulillah, and had experience then working in the community, mentoring, especially mentoring converts, but youth in general as well. And then in my pursuit of trying to serve the community, I was called to serve as the Muslim chaplain at Brown University. So in 2014, that's where I found myself. Found myself as the imam, the Muslim chaplain at Brown. And for those first few years, it was good. Things went well. It was exciting, new place. I was trying to build things, start things. I was appreciated. They hadn't had a Muslim chaplain for 6 months at least. And all the chaplains they'd had before were not, the position was not permanent. I was the first permanent Muslim chaplain, so there was gratitude for me there, and I could ride that, and I felt good in my position. But after a few years, given that I didn't have a distinct sense of what I was doing exactly in that position, other than khidmah, service in general, I started to lose my way a bit. I felt like I was coasting a bit. Felt like I was treading water. I didn't have a distinct path, a distinct trajectory. And this brought me now, in my 5th year of chaplaincy, brought me into the position of being in an executive's office. I was in the office of the Vice President of Student Affairs. Prior to this meeting, I had spoken privately with the Vice President for Student Affairs, and he had also spoken with 3 students, Amina, Jabbar, and Haris. Amina, Jabbar, and Haris. I had to think for a moment about their names because I don't want to give their actual names just to protect their dignity. But Amina, Jabbar, and Haris. And so these 3 students had spoken with the Vice President about how they wanted me gone. They wanted me out of this position. This guy doesn't even play basketball. This guy has isolated, has alienated a few people in the community. He's done this, he's done that. And so I find myself at the end of a long table with the Vice President for Student Services at the end. My direct supervisor, the chaplain of the university, who reports to the Vice President, is sitting there with me, having my back. And then we're speaking with 2 of those students, with Jabbar and Haris. And these 2 students go point by point about what I've done as a Muslim chaplain that they didn't like. And I try to address point by point, explaining my actions. Meanwhile, feeling like, why am I explaining myself? I know the training I have. I know the difficult decisions I've had to make. Why am I explaining myself to 19-year-olds who think they know everything? Because ultimately, I was that 19-year-old once. I was causing issues, thinking I knew how to run things. And now, one thing I could think of was, well, what goes around comes around, right? I'm on the other side of the table of how I treated some of the people who helped me in college, actually. But anyway, I'm sitting there in that meeting trying to defend myself, but also inside, there's a lot of self-doubt. And there's a sense, too, that, okay, I'm in this, I'm a Muslim chaplain, but I also have 1 foot out the door. I'd explained to the Vice President that, I've applied for a PhD program at Harvard. If I get in, this will be my last year as chaplain. And so I already had an exit strategy. And that was at the beginning of my 5th year of chaplaincy. Now, an interesting thing happened about a month or 2 later. This little alien being came into my life. I became a father for the first time. So alhamdulillah, Brown University has a generous family leave policy, parental leave. I got to take 6 weeks off paid from my position. 6 weeks off to take care of this little alien baby here. And when I came back, things were different. For one, I was cool. Everyone wants to play with the baby. I had people over, they got to know little Laith, Muhammad, and suddenly I was cool again. But something deeper happened too. When I came back to my office, one of those first few days in my office, I sat down and I looked at my whiteboard and I took out a green marker and I wrote, making Brown University a place where Laith could be a full Muslim. I wrote at the top of that whiteboard a mission, a sense of purpose for what I was there for. This child came into my life, and suddenly I had a sense I want to build something for him. Now, I don't think he's really going to end up going to Brown University. Who knows, mashallah. But that sense, him coming into my life made things tangible, and everything changed. Such that when I finally did get accepted into the PhD program in Islamic Studies at Harvard, and I announced to the community that I would be leaving in a few months, that day I had students coming into my office crying, talking to me about how much of an inspiration I was. Now, I mention that not to toot my own horn and tell you about how inspirational I am, but to illustrate the point of what happened in me. I became more inspirational when I had a distinct sense of mission. And then sure enough, a few days after that announcement, who shows up in my office but Haris, the same guy who was on the other end of the table in that vice president's office. He shows up in my office and he starts crying. And he's nervous. And he says, I've realized over the past few months, I was listening to voices in the community from people who now I know do not have the best interest of the community in their heart. And now I understand why you were doing the things that we didn't like you doing. And I see the wisdom behind it, and I feel horrible that I'm a reason I contributed to you leaving this place. And I don't know what we're going to do without you. That was Haris. The next day, Jabbar came in, same, apologized, said I was completely wrong and I'm sorry. And then Amina, the sister, she came, and all three of them I still maintain a good relationship with. They had a change of heart because I had a change of heart. But unfortunately, I already was out the door that year. And so the next academic year, I find myself as a first-year PhD student at Harvard University, come in, hit the ground running, ready to go. I knew it would be hard as commuting 2 hours from Providence to Cambridge. I knew it would be hard being a father student, a student parent, having to look after little Laith Muhammad for much of the day so that my wife could work. It was difficult, but I was in it. I was in for the struggle, at least for those first few months. And second semester comes along. And because, once again, now I had had a distinct sense of mission finally at Brown, but now I'm in a different place, haven't quite defined why I'm there. Really, the main reason why I'm there was because I wanted to escape Brown and the stagnancy that I felt there. So I find myself in this place, and I think, I know what to do. I'll have another baby. So Marjan came into my life. But, of course, that didn't really solve things. I realized I couldn't parent myself into motivation and drive and purpose, despite how motivational this little girl is, mashallah. But I remember what happened in that last year at Brown. Finding a sense of purpose, finding a sense of direction, and I said to myself, this is what I have to do here at Harvard. I reached a low point, which I spoke in more detail about last night, at which it became clear to me, so my daughter now coming into my life didn't magically fix my sense of motivation and purpose, but what she did do, what both of those children being in my life did, was realize that time is up. I can't waste any more time. I need to figure these things out. And so I spent the next few months, the next few years, trying out, really making practical the theoretical knowledge I had learned from the Islamic spiritual tradition, trying it out in my life, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, and ultimately, as a student, PhD student at Harvard, working out why I was there, how it fit into my overall mission in life, and how to work through it. And because of my experience doing that, that brings me to me being here today. Now, It's hard to have a sense of mission in today's society because, well, for several reasons. One, as Amy McCready, an author who writes on narcissism and entitlement, has said, she says, entitlement has hit epidemic levels in our society. Everyone thinks that they deserve whatever they want without having to work for it, without having to struggle for a mission in service to others. And if we look at statistics, we realize what's happening when we have a society that doesn't encourage us having a mission of service in our lives. As we mentioned, narcissism increasing since 1979 steadily. We're in the midst of a mental health crisis. This statistic, I believe, is from 10 years ago, so it's probably even worse now, must be. But childhood mental health alone, especially post-pandemic, I'm sure it's worse. Childhood mental health alone costing $250 billion a year in the US. The most extreme form of that, what's called the forever decision, taking one's life, is estimated, according to the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, to cost more lives than war, murder, and natural disasters combined, and to ultimately, when you compare life expectancy of those people who take their own lives, may Allah save all of us from that affliction. When you compare their life expectancy to when their life really ended, that's about 36 million years of life lost every year. But studies show that there is an opportunity. Japanese researchers have found that having a reason for being, an ikigai, statistically leads to a longer life expectancy. And who better to help the world and help America in particular understand how to have a sense of mission and how to have a sense of purpose other than us as Muslims, carrying our prophetic message, carrying this message forward. So we have an opportunity here. Yes, there's a crisis in a way, but it's also an opportunity for us as a Muslim community to do some real good work, change people's lives, and help give them a sense of mission when we tap into our tradition. And so thinking back to how I was able to do that, and learning and testing things out and learning lessons the hard way myself, and this is what made me passionate about putting this life experience and then these teachings from our tradition together and teaching them in the community. And ultimately, my aspiration as well is to bring this beyond the community. So specifically, please, if you're part of companies or events or things that have motivational speakers or anything like that, please consider inviting some of this content in. There are a lot of Christians in this space helping people out. We should be in that space too. Or maybe you are someone as well who can be stepping into the space as well and has something to say. Now, it's interesting because I see an indication in this hadith by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about the importance of having a distinct mission, a distinct purpose. He says, "Man ja'ala al-humuma hamman wahidan, hamma akhirati, kafahu Allahu hamma dunya, wa man tasha'abat bihi al-humum fi ahwal ad-dunya, lam yubadillah fi ayyi awdiyatin halak." Whoever turns their concerns into a single concern, the concern of the hereafter, meeting Allah, knowing what kind of life I'm going to bring forward when I meet Allah, knowing what I've put forward into the hereafter. Whoever puts that into a single concern, not in terms of, well, I've got to take care of that, and there's my family, and there's this, and there's that, and that. No. Bring it all into one distinct purpose, and then bring everything else in orientation around that. Allah will take care of the concerns of the world for them. But for whoever has many competing concerns regarding the affairs of this world, Allah cares not in which valley they perish. Now, our beloved Prophet ﷺ, he he was the most gifted orator of all time. He was the most gifted speaker of all time. He chose his words very deliberately. And so I look at this and I see the word valley. Allah doesn't care in which valley they perish. And you know what I think about? I think about coasting. I think about drifting. When we don't have that one care, when we don't have a distinct mission in life, we just coast through life. We drift, we live for the weekends. We live for the vacation. We live for the retirement, that time when we can just coast down into the valley, rather than embracing the hard struggle of climbing up that mountain, the mountain of our potential in this world. And so it's for all of these reasons that we've developed this program we call Greater, thinking about how we could, as Muslims, not just settle for good enough in our lives, but really think about what our unique greatness is, and ultimately tied to the greatness of Allah as His representatives in this world. Because we know as Muslims, Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater, Allah is greater. So we should tap into that. And so what this program involves, it's a four-phase program. The way I kind of put all of these thoughts and all of this experience and teachings together, each one has 3 lessons in it. So the first phase is to ascertain what our why is, what that purpose is. Ascertain who those enemies are out to get our why, and then what is the how, if you will, what is the well-being that protects that why. Second step is to unchain ourselves from all those unhealthy things that keep us back, the ways that we think unhealthily about failure, the ways we approach decisions, the ways we approach success. After we've unchained ourselves from that, we can retrain ourselves to thrive by having the right behavior, having the right mindsets, being in relationships in the right way, orienting everything around our why, if you will. And then finally, we can attain that greatness, attain that success by our engagement with reflecting on our own demise, on death, by our engagement with Scripture, obviously the Quran in particular, and engaging with true mentors in our lives. And so, given the time constraints today and this weekend, and given that even if we had all the time to go through this content, it wouldn't really settle in. We won't have a chance to go through all of this content. If you are interested in the entirety of the content, you can feel free to reach out to me, head to website. I'll mention this later in the program. But for now, inshallah, as I mentioned, we'll do a quick recap of the 2 lessons that we went into detail on last night. So lesson 1, define your why. Lesson 2, defy your foes. And then the plan is, inshallah, after Asr, to then try to get through lesson 3, finishing up that first phase, and then getting into the first one of the unchained phase, talking about how to think through failure. So we'll see how far we get tonight. I'm not going to try to plow today. I'm not going to try to plow through content, inshallah. It'll be interactive. We want to give you some time to reflect and to discuss. But this will be our plan for today. So first, the first lesson, define your why. When we talked about this last night, I talked about the example of Imam al-Ghazali, who, when you look at his life, when he rectified his life and then found his why, found the real legitimate reason why he should be a scholar and why he should teach and write, that's when his career really took off in terms of him producing some of the best works that our ummah has seen and becoming an influential writer and educator. And so in that regard, we brought up the point last night of your unique why will give you the fuel to fly. When you tap into that unique purpose for yourself, everything in life can fall into place. Motivation happens. We can power through setbacks. We can stay up late, get up early. It's almost like the way that Allah describes the Sahaba in the Quran when they were in the midst of the battlefield. Allah says in Surah Al-Imran, ثُمَّ أَنزَ عَلَيْكُمْ أَمَنَةً نُعَاسًا مِنْهَا أو كما قال, that Allah caused a tranquility and almost a tiredness to come over you on the battlefield. Such that when the companions were in the midst of fighting for their lives and the lives of everyone they cared about, you don't get more engaged in life in that way. You don't get more intensely focused on what's going on right now, besides when you're fighting for your life, defending yourself in the midst of battle. At that point, what's their state? Allah describes their state, it's as if they're sleeping. As if they're sleeping. He's describing a state of flow. They weren't on the battlefield for themselves. They were on the battlefield for a purpose. They knew why they were there, and that why pulled them through and made them completely surpass the people on the other side. Completely surpass the people they were fighting against, who were completely absorbed in the here and now and didn't really know why they were doing it. And so this is the key benefit that happens when we define our why, that I can tell you from personal experience, when I finally started implementing this in my life, when I found that purpose and realized how to defend that purpose against my internal and external enemies, then since that happened about a year ago, when things really clicked into place, I haven't worked as hard in my life. I haven't spent as many times up late and up early working and striving and often hard physical work at any other time in my life, but I have never felt so at peace and so tranquil. And so that's what I would want for all of you as well, to be able to reach that state of flow, to have that motivation throughout. Another way to express this statement, your unique why will give you the fuel to fly, if you'll permit me. The unique why will also give you a lasting high. We know that intoxicants and things that just take our mind away are not acceptable for us as Muslims in this world. But there's a reason why we as humans reach for those things. And even if we're not involved in those things which Allah has prohibited for us, at the end of the day, all of us are doing typically certain things in our lives which give us that high in terms of make us feel a bit better, distract us away from our issues for a momentary time, let us relax and take a breath and be engaged and absorbed in something, whether that's watching Netflix or listening to something, or can even be just being with our kids. Sometimes that becomes just a dunya aspect of let me just lose myself and forget everything. But it doesn't last. It's not pure. When it's done and the real life hits us and the real world slaps us in the face, we realize, I've got to get back to the struggle and the work. But when we define our why and align our lives around it, the whole struggle, all of that effort becomes almost effortless. And so it's interesting when we think about how to find that why, how you might find your why. As I mentioned, Muslims aren't in this space, but should be. But someone who has preceded us in this space in terms of the importance of defining why and how to do that is a man named Simon Sinek. And he said that this process of finding your why is a process of discovery, not invention. You're not going to get to your purpose by saying, well, you know what, maybe I should do this. And I'm going to think about it, and yeah, I'm going to do that. It's not a conscious decision. You have to reach back into your life in the formative moments. Think about what sustains you. Reflect on your life and discover what Allah has already placed in you. Because, as our beloved Prophet ﷺ said, كُلٌّ مُيَسَّرٌ لِمَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. Everyone finds easy the life for which they have been created. You were created for something unique. Allah has put you through certain experiences, given you certain abilities in order to do something specific in this world. And Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, may God have mercy on him, to bring him up again, he mentions in his book, The Marvels of the Heart, that there are two ways to gain knowledge. And the way he speaks about knowledge is also, this applies to the knowledge, that internal knowledge that comes with finding our purpose as well. He says one way to gain knowledge is, imagine knowledge is water. And one way that you can fill a basin with water is you can go around the surface of the earth and you can make channels into that basin and form streams and tributaries, and just to channel that water into the basin and fill it up. And that'll bring some water into the basin. But he said the other way to do it, the other way to get that water, is to plug up all those channels around the basin and get in the basin and start digging and dig and dig and dig. And then at some point, after a considerable amount of time and hard work and struggle, you hit groundwater, and what happens to that groundwater? It starts gushing up. This is what can happen when we find that sense of purpose, is that it's no longer about, trying to manage this, manage that, work through this, but really there's a wellspring of motivation and direction and purpose that comes from within us. So, how do we find that? Well, now, in a moment, I promised we would make this a little interactive, so we're going to take a moment. I'll ask you to find a partner in a moment, so you'll be in groups of 2. If you're all alone and can't find another one to be with, then make a group of 3. And we're going to do a little why dowsing exercise. So dowsing was traditionally, before we had hydrogeologists, was a not quite scientific way of trying to find well water. People would use a rod or a branch or a crystal or something on the end of a string to walk around a piece of property, and when that rod or whatever would move or flip down or something, they would say, oh, here's the groundwater, here's where we should make a well. And so dowsing was more of an art than a science, and similarly, this act of how we try to find our why, try to find our purpose in life, it's more of an art than a science. Which is why we call it the why dowsing exercise. So what we want to start to get at least start thinking about in these next few minutes when we take this time for the exercise, is getting to answer the question, what is your why? What is my why? And we will just do your best to start thinking about what is your why, and to take a look at these questions that I'm about to post here. So, Allah, 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 Allah. So, when we begin to get that sense of our why and begin to defend it, there are a few things we can do to test to see if we've really gotten that why. We call these the 6 why quality tests, the 6 why quality tests. And so this is our test kit here, just to go through them very quickly. One is the motivation test to see if does this why give me motivation? Does it drive? Does it push me through? Is it unique to me? It doesn't have to be super unique, but is it something that wouldn't just apply to everyone? Then is it also memorable? Is it brief enough and catchy enough for me to be able to remind myself of it and know exactly word by word what that why is, so that I can keep living my life in accordance with it? Number 4, does it cause me to be in service to others, and to all others ultimately? It doesn't mean maybe our why is really just to do with, at this point in our lives, raising children in a particular way. There's nothing wrong with that, but at least the intentionality there should be that we're raising children to benefit all of humanity ultimately. Next comes the future test of, does this give me a sense of what to do in the future? Can I see the path ahead of myself in this regard? And then finally, the generative test. Is this something which is going to be fruitful and continues to give me something to do as long as I'm in this world? I'm not just doing it and then looking forward to retirement when I can stop doing this thing, but maybe retirement will come and I keep serving this why, just in a different capacity, because I don't have to make money off of it anymore. And by the way, the why doesn't necessarily have to do with what we're doing in our careers. Right? Our careers can be just simply a means of facilitating that why for us as well. So, we've spoken about the importance of finding that why well, understanding that in those moments when life drags us down, we can let our why raise us up. It can do that for us, and if we've really found it, then it will do that for us, because at the end of the day, your unique why will give you the fuel to fly. So, moving on before Asr, lesson 2, defy your foes. And I will be going rather quickly through this content just so we can keep on time and get into the new material for today especially as well. The reason why this content is important to go through after going through lesson 1 is because we can have a sense of our why, have a sense of what we're doing in life, but if we don't have a sense of who's there out to get us and to take our why away from us and to dump some poison in that why well and have us serve their purposes rather than Allah's, then we'll be stuck naive. We'll get wrapped up in all kinds of things that we shouldn't get wrapped up in, and we'll be taken off our why. So, Simon Sinek, once again returning to him, the author of Start With Why, he mentions this, that defining the why is not the hard part. Remaining completely in balance and authentic is the most difficult part. He mentions this in his book, but it's kind of a teaser because he doesn't really say what to do with that. But we as Muslims, we know what to do with it because we know our enemies. Who are our enemies? Yes. Nafs, shaitan, hawa, and dunya. And if we don't understand those enemies, if we don't learn to defend our why, it will be taken from us. So, who are those enemies? Nafs, hawa, shaitan, and dunya. We've come up with this helpful acronym, foes, to remember all those as well and to kind of translate them away from their directly Arabic and Quranic context, for just once again, because the hope for this kind of material is that it will be beneficial on a broad level. So the F in foes stands for feelings, which is a rough translation of hawa, or whim, which is mentioned in the Quran. Allah tells us many times in the Quran, beware of the person who takes his whim as his Lord, takes whatever I'm feeling at the moment as my way to be. No, we should know why we're doing something and have that intent and that purpose. So this enemy, what is this enemy? Well, what it isn't feelings in terms of our gut instinct. Oh, I have a feeling about this. No, it's feelings in terms of like, yeah, I feel like having chocolate, even though you bought vanilla ice cream for me. I don't really want that one. Right? Those kind of feelings. So also wanting to just feel good. Feel good. Just want to relax. Yeah, and also feeling good in terms of not being pushed outside of my comfort zone with regards to how I feel like I am in the world. You know, like I'm an introvert. You know, I don't really want to put myself out there. If you're in a community of Muslims living in a place and no one has set up a masjid and no one's observing Jum'ah, it's your responsibility as a man, at least. Women don't have this responsibility. As a man, it's your responsibility to make sure that Jum'ah happens. If need be, you have to be able to get up there in front of the Muslims of the area, give a khutbah, lead the salah, and be okay with that. But if you just say, oh, you know, I'm introverted, I'm not really the kind of person who speaks in front of people. All that talk, I'm not really the kind of person who blank. That is what's problematic, and that's where often feelings come into play. When that takes us away from something we know we really should step up and do. And so the more that we learn about our personality, often personality typing assessments in our day and age can be very helpful actually for knowing how does my hawa manifest in my life. What are those feelings that make me feel comfortable? At the end of the day, what feelings is telling us is it's whispering in our head and saying, I just want to be free. I just want to break. And that's appealing because we do want freedom. Life is hard. We do want to take a rest. We want to relax. It's hard being on all the time. Especially these days, we have a family, and we've got commitments, we've got job, and all these things, the commute, all these things going on. But ultimately, we have to understand, we have to say back to that voice, I wasn't meant for ultimate freedom. Well, I was meant for ultimate freedom, but ultimate freedom which is a function of servitude. Servitude to Allah. Servitude to our purpose, which is how we're serving Allah by serving our fellow humans in this world. And if we're looking to be comfortable in this life, why not make it a sustained comfort? Why not be comfortable with being uncomfortable? Like Bilal, radiallahu anh, under the rock. Huge rock placed on him, trying to take his Islam away from him, trying to get him to renege on his commitment to Islam. But he had a certain level of deep comfort even with the rock on him, such that even when he wasn't able to speak, he still went like this: one God, one God. I'm not going back to saying there are multiple gods. This is how we have to respond to those feelings inside of us. The other enemy, the O, stands for outcomes. Rough translation of dunya, the material world. What is close to us, but we can never quite grasp it. That's what dunya has, the connotation in the Arabic. It's that which is right close to you, but every time you reach out to it, it's not really there. There's nothing there. It's empty. You don't catch anything in your hand. Outcomes mean nothing at the end of the day. When we're focused on a specific kind of success and a specific kind of accomplishment, maybe Allah won't give you that accomplishment. Then what? Maybe the kind of people you're looking to who have gotten that accomplishment have led completely different lives for you. You're not going to be judged according to their standards. You're going to be judged according to the ones that Allah placed you in. But it also manifests as not wanting to accomplish anything. Because if we are serious about the pursuit of our why, then we want to do certain things in this world. We just leave the results up to Allah. But to completely be indifferent about the results is also a manifestation of outcomes, just kind of the reflection and the reversal of it, of this enemy. So this enemy is not about inattentiveness to accomplishment. And Allah alludes to this in the Quran when He talks about the akhirah, saying, تلك الدار الآخرة نجعلها للذين لا يريدون علوا في الأرض ولا فسادا والعاقبة للمتقين. That who is the next life for? It's the people who do not seek superiority. That's who it's for. Uluwa in Arabic. Ulu is to be above. It's to be in comparison to something else and better than that other thing. So Allah is indicating here, it's not about being better than the other guy. It's about accepting what you're in and knowing that you have done better today than you did yesterday. You have advanced in terms of your relationship with Allah. You've lived out this motto of our deen, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater. There's always more to Him. There's always a deeper relationship to have with Him. There's always more we can be doing, living according to our purpose. What outcomes whispers to us, this enemy of ours, is it whispers, it says, I need to know I'm valuable. I need to know I'm worth something and that I'm better than others, and I need to know it now. It's impatient, and that's appealing too, because yeah, we want to know that we're doing the right thing. We want to know that it's all good in the end. We want to know, but the fact is we can't know that. We have more to learn. We have more to grow. We have to say back to it, my value doesn't come from comparing myself to others. It comes internally. I have to know my value. My value has to be rooted in my Creator's knowledge about my value. And that value will continue to unfold until I exit this world. The only person I can compete with is myself. And it's interesting to bring this back now to Simon Sinek once again. He says, when you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you. You just want to be better than the other guy. Oh, okay, let's just let him do his thing. Okay, fine. But when you compete against yourself, everyone wants to help you. When there are only a few positions open at this particular workplace, and you say to people, yeah, I want to get that position, but you having the position involves other people not having the position. Other people around you, if you were to tell them about that, they might want that position too. They're not going to be interested in helping you. But when you tell people about why you're doing something, your unique purpose, what it means to you, another sign that you found that why is that you say it to other people, and not everyone, sometimes people don't understand, but in general people hear that and are like, wow, yeah, that's cool. It's not my thing, but yeah, I could really see how that could be your thing. I can really see how we would really need that as a community. We really need that in this world. Like the Sister Cece last night. I don't know if you were like me, inspired by hearing her talk about her why of wanting to increase financial literacy amongst underprivileged and under-resourced communities. That's inspiring. I want her to be successful in that. The next enemy is the ego. In Arabic and in the Quran, the nafs, that enemy which runs deepest within us because it gets at our very self. Now, this is not your sense of self in terms of your individuality. We all have to be true to ourselves in many regards, and there are many ways in which spiritual abuse is enacted in the community because people are told to be in a certain relationship or do a certain thing that ultimately goes against the very being of who they are. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your own sense of identity. What I am talking about is that sense in you that, oh, I need to make it all about me. And I need to fill myself with food, fill myself with pleasure, with drink, with just fill my stomach, all of that sense of being filled and only wanting my way. That's what the ego says. Ego says, my way, fill me up. But we have to say back, it's not about being filled. It's about being fulfilled. And yeah, you might want to make everyone understand that they should be serving you. They should be doing something for you. What is this doing for me? What's in it for me? But ultimately, where we should be, our positionality towards the world is looking at everything, looking at everyone and thinking, how can I serve? How can I make this better? How can I improve this person's life? Asserting our individuality in that way rather than our selfish ego interests in that way in regards to how we look at the world. And then finally, the ultimate enemy, who's unlike the other enemies, because the other enemies ultimately, they can be tamed, they can be used for good actually, they can be won over at the end of the day, as long as we understand their harm, understand also our weakness to them and work with that. But Shaitan, also the shadow side of us, if you will, when you look at the story of Adam alayhi salam, you see as soon as Adam is raised up, Iblis comes into the picture. Iblis only becomes Iblis once Adam is created. Once there's this human, then there's the anti-human, if you will, everything against what the human represents and should be, trying to pull that human to be more like him, more like the shatana and the shayv, having connotations in Arabic of both distance from Allah and anger, being angry at this human, angry at this real deep sense of purpose and this potential. So Shaitan is unlike the others because he will always be an enemy to you, and he always calls you to things that you know are wrong. They might not be necessarily wrong according to the Sharia, according to our prophetic guidance, but you know that it's beneath you at the end of the day if you were really to sit down. It's not something you should be involved in. If he can't get you to do things that are against our prophetic character, then he'll get you to do things that just waste your time. They're beneath you. But sometimes things are presented as wrong by society, but they won't be wrong to us. Sometimes we have to stand up for our why in a way which causes us to go against the grain, in a way in which others don't necessarily understand us. Shaitan calls to us and whispers in our ear saying, I'm a danger to self and others. We hear that voice. Wow. No, I think I really messed up. I think I must be cursed. I think I'm just going to fail. I don't know. Oh. He wants to paralyze us about our own bad potential. But ultimately, that bad potential, the potential to do immense harm, immense wrong, represents also our potential to do immense good. We have that potential inside of us. even though others might see it temporarily as failure. Do I have any Ertuğrul fans in the audience? Anyone like that show, Ertuğrul? Okay, we've got a few hands. One of my favorite quotes from Ertuğrul. The whole first series, it starts with Ertuğrul, if you're not familiar with the series, Turkish series about the founder of the Ottoman Empire. And so the series starts with Ertuğrul being out with his friends hunting one day and coming upon a woman who needed help, who's being oppressed by the Crusaders, and he steps in and defends her, ends up taking the lives of these guys who are trying to take her life and abuse her. And because of that, then he involves his whole tribe, his whole camp, in a huge mess. They're facing destruction themselves. And so everyone in his life is telling him, what have you done? You've brought destruction upon our whole tribe. But he had a why. He knew why he stuck up for that woman. And he says, they say the sky will fall on us if we don't give up the guests. Won't the sky fall on us if we do? What will happen to our customs, our way of life? He's saying, okay, no one else understands me in my culture, in my society, but I know deep down, and they know deep down, they just don't have the strength to admit it, that I need to make a stand on this, that it's not right to do anything else. Sometimes life calls us to be like that. The Prophet, ﷺ, for many years, being this lone voice, saying what was right, even though, and this is the story of most of the prophets, all his people saying, what are you doing? You're destroying society, you're breaking us down, you hate your family, you hate your people, you're just an enemy to us. But he knew what he had to do. So these are our enemies: feelings, outcomes, ego, and Satan, or shadow, if you will. And the last point important to understand in this regard is that these enemies can be both internal, and since they're internal to us, they are also external, because they're internal to everyone around us. So sometimes people can represent these enemies in our lives, or can be almost completely subservient to them, calling us to something that we know isn't right. And Allah teaches this in the Quran, when He talks in the last surah in the Quran about the importance to seek refuge from the shayateen, from the Satans, min al-jinnati wan nas, those amongst jinn kind and humankind. So these are our enemies, both internal and external. And it's hard to always keep up that awareness, always keep up that intentionality to go against these enemies. But at the very least, when we face setbacks, those should serve as reminders for us. And we should take setbacks in the pursuit of your why as reminders to check for your foe's poison. So there's times when you're put out of flow. You had a flow, but then you put out of it. Something doesn't go the way you expected it to. You run against something. You feel like you failed in some way. Those are the times to take a step back and think, has my well been a little polluted? Has it been poisoned by one of those foes, one or multiple? Let me check. Let me think through that. And so we have an exercise to think through this. I'll just put the questions up in case anyone wants to just take a quick picture of it or something for your own records. But this will be pretty much the end of this content as we break for Asr, and then get into lessons 3 and 4, inshallah. So now getting into lesson 3 of our content. So we spoke about our why, how to define it, how to know that we've defined it. We spoke about who is there against our why. And now it's time to take another look at this image of the why well that we've put up, and understand what are the hows that defend that why. Before I get into this content, I wanted to tell a little story. My senior year of college, it's my 3rd Ramadan, and at least at the beginning of Ramadan, I'm back home in Minnesota with my mother. It's the end of the summer break before I head back for my senior year of college. And I'm at home with my mother, and she's started this new habit. She's found a personal trainer. She goes to Physique by Malik. So Physique by Malik is this really good personal trainer that she found, and she says, Adrian, you should go to him. I'm going to pay for you to have some sessions with Malik while you're here. You'll love him. You connect with him. So she gets in contact with Malik. I say, Mom, I'm fasting. I don't think I could do an intense workout while I'm fasting during the day. So he goes out of his way to make evening time for me. After I've broken my fast, have a bit of energy in me, he said, then we're going to work out. It's like, come, we're going to work out. We're going to get some good work done. So I'm there with physique with Malik. And as you can see, Malik has the kind of body that's like the cover of a Men's Health magazine. So as a man, naturally, when I see someone in real life who has that kind of physique, I start trying to make excuses for myself and think, okay, so I don't have that body and he does because he's a professional, right? He gets to spend his whole time working out, right? This is his gym. He runs his business, Physique by Malik. That's why he gets a body like that. And that's why I don't have that. I feel a little better about myself. But I still come in, I'm pumped, I'm ready to have a session with Physique by Malik. So he puts me down, and I know I have this vision of how I'm going to be for the workout, I'm doing these squats, doing these heavy squats over and over again, doing some clap push-ups, all right. Getting all this work done, so he puts me under the exercises, and I'm going good for a few minutes, and then I'm like, oh, wait, just give me a moment, just let me catch my breath. I start feeling really like this tightness in my stomach. And for a few minutes, I just spend a few minutes just laid out on the bench, trying to wait. Okay, just give me a few minutes, Malik, just give me a few minutes. Yeah, okay. And the interesting thing is, I feel so bad. But he didn't feel bad. He's like, I got you, Adrian. We're going to do this. You just come back. We'll have a good workout. I got you, my man. So, okay, I'll come back next time. Sure enough, next time, same thing happens. And then I get home one day, and my mother says, so Malik tells me that you spent the session lying down on the bench. I said, Mom, please don't ask me about it. Please, I don't want to talk about it. That, my senior year of college, was the first time, really, that I remember having significant stomach and digestive issues, and continued to have them for many years. That was the first time I remembered feeling like there was something going on physically with me that I needed to get a handle on. It was keeping me back from having a good workout. Keeping me back, it wasn't about having a physique. For me, it was about feeling good in my physical body. Not just that, but being present for my family. I started feeling more and more fatigued during the day, especially in the afternoons and the evenings. So now it became about being able to drive my family safely home, being able to be with my wife in the car and not feel like I was going to fall asleep. There were certain physical things in my life, that fatigue, this stomach cramping, indigestion, these things, muscle tightness, that I thought, okay, I haven't felt this all my life, it just started happening recently, and so there must be some cause, there must be something to do, I want to try to figure it out. So I went to experts to try to figure it out, went to medical experts, had all kinds of blood tests done, had food sensitivity tests. Okay, so now remember at this time, so here was the place where I thought I was going to be with Physique with Malik, right? Doing the squats, doing the handstand, not the handstand push-ups. That's what I'm working towards right now. May Allah give me tawfiq. But the clap push-ups, doing those kind of things. But, right, here's where I found myself, just laid out on the bench. And I knew I wanted to get back there, and so I went to the medical experts to help me get back there. Took a food sensitivity test, realized that it looks like I have an issue with gluten. Oh, that made me feel a little better. Okay, I got a little closer, but did some blood tests for food sensitivity. Didn't learn that much there. Did a test where I had to swallow some metal substance so they could watch it go through me on the MRI. That didn't help at all. Took test after test. Tried reading these principles in this book and that health book, and things got a bit better, but I felt like, given all these things that I was trying, I was getting further away from the person I wanted to be physically. Now this brings us to about a year ago, almost a year ago, I'm at the local calisthenics gym near my house, and in the pursuit of me trying to find a solution and trying to consult people of what could make me feel better, what could really lift me up and not have me just feeling fatigued for so much of the day and being able to really do hard work and be in the struggle on life. I met some crazies along the way, and so this was one of them. I met Tommy, who's now a friend of mine, but the first day I met him at the calisthenics park, okay, so same thing happened with me, with Malik. I see this guy with the physique of a Men's Health cover model, and I think, okay, so let me feel a little better about myself. There's got to be something that's going really wrong in his life that explains why he's able to have a body like that and I'm not able to. So let me think. Well, oh man, I couldn't come up with a reason. And meanwhile, he's there doing his workout, doing crazy things like this, the human flag. And I tell him after he does a little routine with the bars and stuff, I tell him, Tommy, how are you able to do this? And he turns to me and says, carnivore diet, bro. It's the only way to live. I'm like, carnivore diet? What the? I say, what is that? I've never heard about that in my life. He says, basically like, just eat meat. Meat. Dude, changed my life. So many people are doing it. They're seeing like their diabetes going away and this thing going away. They're feeling better. They're feeling the best shape of their lives. I wouldn't do anything else, dude. You should try it too. And I'm like, okay, I got it. He's a crazy, right? That's why he's able to look so fit, because there's something a little wrong up here. Are you serious? Eating meat, only meat, all day long? What would that do to the environment? What would it do to my grocery bills? What would it do? It sounds completely crazy, completely unsustainable, and a recipe for heart disease. So no, thank you, and thanks for giving me a chance to feel a little bit better about myself as a man. So now, a few months after that, it's the day of Eid al-Adha. And as Eids normally go, there's a lot of food around on Eid, right? And a lot of carbs. And so I know myself, and I've done enough work on myself physically to know I shouldn't have that much. I really am strict about my portions and indulge a bit, but not really that too much. But it's Eid, and so there's this big display of nice food on the table. And here I am now at the evening of Eid al-Adha. And I'm laid out on the couch in my home, and my wife is doing the dishes alone. And I'm laid out on the couch once again. Laid out on the couch and thinking, this is not the kind of life I want to lead. I'm in so much pain and so fatigued. I know I can't get up. I can't help, but I know that's wrong. I'm not living up to my potential. There's something wrong, and it's keeping me back from my potential as a person, as a husband, as a man, as a father. And so I'm on that couch and I think, maybe it's time to do something a little crazy. I'm going to try this silly carnivore thing and see what the heck happens. And I did. The first few days were rough. My wife almost cried several times seeing the pain I was in when I saw them eat the nice food she prepared. And I said, I'm going to have some boiled lamb, because that's what we had in the house. Because for the udhiyah for Eid, we had 50 pounds of lamb in the fridge. So I thought, okay, well, there's my carnivore diet there for a few weeks. So I didn't realize at the time, I'd never really prepared meat that well myself. I'm a very functional guy. I don't typically deal with big cubes of meat like we had from the udhiyah. So the only thing I knew to do was just stick it in the Instant Pot and press go. And so eating tasteless, because by the way, carnivore diet, you can't have any condiments except salt. So tasteless boiled lamb, feeling sorry for myself. Those first few days were rough. The first few weeks were rough. I would wake up in the middle of the night feeling horrible, and all kinds of issues started happening. But all kinds of things started going right. And that man I was looking to be, who didn't have the fatigue, who was present throughout the day, wasn't constantly thinking about how my stomach felt and what was it wrong that I had that day, that started to go away. Even some mental health issues, depression, which I had dealt with for at least a decade, just vanished, almost overnight. I tell you this story to teach a lesson. What's that lesson? Well, for one, don't take nutritional advice from this guy. Alhamdulillah, I was able to work things out. I'm not strictly carnivore. I'm more on the keto diet now and have transitioned towards that. But, right, don't follow exactly what I did. It's probably not the right thing for you. It will probably leave you with grease stains all over your clothes and all over your house that you'll never be able to clean up. It'll leave you with people not wanting to invite you for dinner because it just gets way too complicated and way too not interesting. And it'll leave you being way too creative in hotel rooms, in hotel bathrooms to be exact. But what I do want to leave you with is the lesson I've learned from this experience, that peculiar habits preserve the hows that protect your why. That if we're serious about pursuing our why, if we go all in on our why and are just about that very particular mission in life and driving towards it and being on point, we can really get out of balance. Jason Pargin, an American writer, he alludes to this when he says, your heroes are regular people who probably got good at one thing by neglecting everything else. We don't want to be those kind of heroes. We don't want to be the superstars in the community. MashaAllah, guy's doing so much for the community. He's making breakfast at Fajr, and then he's here for Isha and here for Fajr. Yeah, but in the next life, what's his family account going to be like? Has he been there for his family? Has he been there for the people around him? Has he served in this way? We see people moving towards a mission, but that mission has to be grounded, it has to be protected. And so in order to have a why and stick to it, it's not just about understanding the enemies out to get our why, but also understanding how to create stability around that why by finding our hows. And if we are serious about finding those hows, then we will be serious about finding often very peculiar habits, like only eating meat for 3 months, because we're so intent on reaching that way that we know we want our life to be, and that is going to facilitate our why. Sometimes no one else really gets it, but we do. And we know it's just what we have to do. And so, the hows around our why well are like the wall built around the well. What do you think the wall is doing here around that well? To me, I see it serving two functions. What do you see? Any guesses? What does a wall around the well do? So it protects the water, right? So that's one key function of the well around the wall around the well, is that it protects the water, right? Protects from who? The foes, right? The enemies. It's going to be harder for them to dump that poison in if the well is not exposed, if it has the protective surrounding around it. If it doesn't have that and we get all out of whack, we're not getting enough sleep, we're not there for our family, we haven't developed the right relationships, if that happens, it becomes our why well becomes much more penetrable to our enemies, right? We really feel the need to take a break and just indulge in something we know that we shouldn't be indulging in, right? Shaitan can slip in there, the nafs, the feelings, the outcomes, all of that can slip in there if we're not protecting that well. So that's one key function that the wall around the well does. What else does it do for us? Any guesses? What was that? Yes, how so? Exactly right. It enables you to draw from that well and keep drinking that water without falling in and getting submerged and drowning. We can get drowned in our why. That's not a good thing. Yes, our why will give us that fuel to fly, but we need to take care of ourselves too. It needs to be sustainable. And so if you notice, this wall is made up of 5 levels of brick, which represent the 5 elements of well-being that we have around our why, the 5 hows, if you will. So the first how is our spiritual well-being. That's the foundation of it all at the end of the day. After that, in terms of importance, is our physical well-being. On top of that is put the layer of our mental well-being. On top of that is put our social well-being. And then finally, on top of that is our material well-being. What does that mean? Well, for one, so the spiritual, this gets at our worship to Allah, our salah, our dhikr, also just our general approach to life, our sense of gratitude, our sense of patience, perseverance, our ethics, the way that we approach life, the quality of our hearts. Then physical well-being, that gets to our fitness, our habits of sleep, nutrition, everything to do with our physical bodies and maintaining them. Then mental, I often like to call this too intellectual health, because mental health has the connotation of needing therapy or that kind of thing. I'm not just talking about not having mental health issues, but in terms of thinking, how do we make our decisions? How do we approach decisions? How do we maintain balance in our mind and know that we have the right thinking patterns? How is our mentality throughout life, our worldview? The social level has to do with how am I showing up for others in my life, and how am I asking them to show up for me? And then finally, the material level is in terms of, okay, how is my sustenance? How's that coming? The property that I own, that I've been given responsibility for, what is my relationship to that? What kind of responsibility do I feel? And so the inspiration behind this whole rubric comes from the theoretical basis of the maqasid al-sharia from our tradition, which many of our legal scholars have come up with and agreed upon these 5 aims and purposes for our sacred law. Why do we have the sharia? Why do we have the sacred law? Well, it's to protect these areas of life, such as hifdud deen, protecting deen, protecting religious practice. Then we have, after that, is hifdul nafs, protecting individual human life. The third one is hifdul aql, protecting the mind or the intellect. That the key example of this principle of hifdul aql is said to be the reason of why khamr, why intoxicants are prohibited for us, so that they don't take our mind away from us. That's why that's in the sharia. Then number 4, we have hifdul nasl, or preservation of the family. And then finally, hifdul mal, preservation of personal property. These are the 5 maqasid al-sharia in our tradition. So this is where the inspiration for these 5 levels of well-being comes. And so if you take a look at this graphic, then we have the 5 levels of the wall around the well, but each level is made up of what? Individual parts, individual bricks. Right, and if you were to take a close look at each one of these bricks would be unique. Each one of these bricks is a particular size. They're not all going to be standardized, which is why peculiar habits preserve the hows that protect your why. Hows can be pretty standard. When we think about our spiritual well-being, I'm sure most of us, if not all in this room, share a lot in common in terms of wanting to keep up salah, wanting to remember Allah in a certain way and establish our relationship with Him, wanting to have a certain level of gratitude and ethic in this world. So we might share that how, but just like the how, or just like the why, the how is a little intangible. It's made tangible by the habits. And those habits will often be very unique to us. So what keeps you connected to Allah, what keeps you grateful for in life, might be something very different from the next person. And that's why we say peculiar in particular habits, preserve the hows that protect your why. And so, given that they're peculiar, my advice to you is when a habit isn't serving a how, fall crazy in love with another. When a habit isn't serving a how, fall crazy in love with another. So here, returning to this story, so when I'm at that calisthenics park, Tommy is trying to do da'wah to me, right, for the carnivore diet. Bro, just try it, dude, change your life. He's excited about his diet. He's excited about this habit. He's in love with this habit. He's having the time of his life doing this carnivore diet thing, which may or may not be for me. Then I try it, and it worked in certain regards and didn't work in others, so I had to tweak it. I moved more towards keto, or less little strict on just meat. And so throughout our life, we'll never be done with this. Every day is different. Every day in particular, our body's a little different, especially over time. And so this work never ends, and so there will be a constant sense of tweaking that we have to keep two things almost in tension together. One, falling in love with the habits that we have, establishing them, being excited about them, almost wanting to do da'wah about them, right? Yeah, I'm trying this new thing, this new diet, or I got this new fitness regimen, you should know about it. Letting other people know about that. We want to fall in love with those, but also be ready to have the awareness that when they're not serving a how, ready to scrap them and move on to something equally inspirational. One of the mistakes we often make is we scrap it for nothing. Oh, that didn't work. Well, what are you going to try instead of it? How are you going to remain focused and committed to that how? So, now, in a moment, we'll take a few minutes for an exercise again. I am going to post on here some draft hows. So, some brothers and I in the Rhode Island community, we work together to try to define, just as men together, as brothers, what we wanted our well-being to look like in these areas. And so I figured I'd just put this out as a beginning point for all of you, just as a starting point to get you to start thinking about what that well-being is for you, what you would tweak in terms of this wording. And so I'm going to make it a little more active and just not me talking. So I'll put some brothers on the spot to read these. So spiritual well-being, what's my draft spiritual well-being?
Consistently have new insights on the meaning of life. Maintain gratitude, positivity, and good character.
Right. So that's my draft for that one. See if you like it. What do you like? What don't you? What is it missing? What's the next? Physical well-being.
Have vitality, be able to defend myself and others.
Right. In particular, this might be a little more applicable to men than women, which we often feel the sense to for physical defense, especially of ourselves and our families. But it is generally applicable, so see what you do with that. Okay. Intellectual well-being.
Exhibit responsible, non-reactive thinking, confidence, and tranquility.
Right. Okay. Now, how about social well-being?
Maintain strong bonds with family, friends, sustain relationships with neighbors and colleagues, have a network of support.
All right. So we'll see how we feel about that. And then finally, material well-being.
Be charitable with my time and money, take care of what I own.
Right. So if you notice, these are all things that are general principles. They're not really quite check boxes yet, but they start to generate the check boxes that we think, okay, what exactly would that look like in my life? So once again, I'll ask you to get back with your partner. If you had a partner from the previous exercise, if you haven't, find someone or find another person. Once again, we'll take 4.5 minutes to think through how would you change, add, or remove wording here to describe your own hows. And if you're done with that, you can move on to the second question of what smart habits support each how for you. If anyone's heard this rubric of SMART, it stands for a good habit should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So with that, You'll have 4.5 minutes, and I encourage, let's kind of give our bodies a bit of a break. I encourage you, if you've been sitting, maybe stand while you're talking for this part of the exercise. Let's get our blood flowing a bit. 4.5 minutes. So, let's hear from a few. Interested? Does anyone have a peculiar habit that kind of sustains a how for them? That's just interesting to share, interesting for us to hear and benefit from? Anyone? Got a sister over there. This one there.
Hello. Hi. Intermittent fasting and keto. I lost 60 pounds in a year.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, keto and intermittent fasting.
Okay, MashaAllah. Yeah, that can be a peculiar habit, not for everyone necessarily, but I do agree with that personally in terms of my physical makeup. MashaAllah. Anyone else? A peculiar habit. Yes, okay, we've got a brother back here.
I try to put a time limit on the things I love so I can get the other stuff out of the way. So it's like I have to do my other stuff to do the things I like, because if I don't do the things I like, then it's kind of like, you know. So it's kind of like forcing me to stay more accountable.
And how do you make those time limits? Do you set a timer for yourself?
Yeah, like for example, I like to practice Arabic. So it's like if I'm doing my work, I can't spend my time doing Arabic. If I can't do Arabic, I get irritated because I love it so much. So yeah.
Nice, nice. All right, one more voice. Anyone else want to share? All right, this one there.
So one thing I did actually combines, I think, spiritual and physical is like I try to do 10,000 steps every day. So what I'll do is I listen to lectures when I'm walking. So I'm getting, like I have like Bayana program, for example. So I'll listen to like tafsir. So that helps me get the exercise and learn something about the religion every day.
MashaAllah. Well, thank you, all three of you, for sharing. Yeah, often it just takes a little bit of confidence and a little bit of stepping out of our comfort zone to find those peculiar habits that will preserve our why. As we mentioned, peculiar habits preserve the hows that protect your why, and when a habit isn't working for you, isn't serving a how, fall crazy in love with another. May Allah give us love, make us people of love, for Him and for everyone and everything in between. All right, Bismillah. So, moving on in the about hour we have left to lesson 4, inshallah. Getting at now, we've finished the first 3 lessons, which have to do with the ascertain stage. So getting at understanding what's going on, defining our why, starting to define the well-being that preserves our why, finding those hows, figuring out what those enemies are that want to take us away from that why and the how. And so now getting into the first lesson in the content, which is about really now making this practical in terms of a certain area in our life. So first of all, how we approach failure. And as I like to do, I would like to share some personal grief with you in terms of learning this lesson the hard way. First, I want to start with a question. Could I get a show of hands in terms of how many of you own a home here? How many of you own a home? Okay, mashallah. May Allah continue to preserve that wealth and extend it to the rest of the community as well. When I was growing up as a child, I did not want to be one of you. Did not want it. I learned from an early age that having a home was a headache. This really doesn't show up too well on this projector, but this is an image of a bathroom cabinet with a mirror on the front. Just because of the lighting doesn't show up too well. But I put this image on here because it reminds me of an incident that happened in my home when I was about 14 or 15. Yeah, I don't think turning off the lights is going to help it. Let's bring those back on. Whoever just did that. Thank you. Can't do that. But thank you for trying. I appreciate that. So when I was about 14 or 15, my mother repainted the bathroom on our second floor. And I mentioned, I guess it was last night I think I mentioned it. I grew up an only child, mainly raised by my mother. So it was just me and her in this big house. And so she was the one taking care of a lot of the things that needed to take care of. She actually really enjoys painting enjoys renovating, so she had a lot of fun repainting that second floor bathroom. And then we had to take all the fixtures off the wall for her to repaint it. And so that was an independent project of hers. Her principle with me when she raised me was, you have your studies and your activities. I was doing classical piano at the time, was quite accomplished in that. So she wanted me to focus on those kind of things, and she would take care of stuff in the home. Quite the opposite of what I do with my children. They gotta work for their space in the home. I think that they gotta help us out. But she needed my help just getting the final thing up, the bathroom cabinet. She didn't have the strength to do it herself. She needed me to hold it while she screwed it back in. And so here we are. So there's the sink. The sink is here, and the bathtub is right there. And then there's the toilet is right there, so there's that space. And then, imagine this is no longer the toilet, right? Here's the mirror. I'm holding up this mirror, and the mirror isn't too heavy, right? It's not that heavy. But I have to stand away from it, so because of the sink right under that mirror, and hold it in such an awkward position, both to hold it against that wall and leave space for my mother to screw, that it's really putting a strain on my arms, and I'm shaking and straining and struggling, and we're at this for several minutes as we both try to get this in, and I have to take a break at one point. I'm sorry, Mom. Okay, let's go again. And so I'm holding this up, and she's getting those screws in, and we finally get it in after so much of a struggle, such a long struggle, getting that mirror cabinet in. We take a breath and look at it, and I look at it and I realize, wait, I don't remember a lip being on the bottom of that cabinet. And she looks at it and she says, Adrian, it's upside down. And I did what most of us men tend to do when a woman in our life starts crying. Start telling her why she shouldn't be crying, right? Which is the opposite of what we're supposed to do. Like, Mom, no, look, like, we can live with this, just a little lip. We'll get used to it. So, yeah, it was on the top before, but, we can put our things, it'll stop things from falling out. It's nice, it's good, it's all good. You can stop crying, Mom. But she breaks down. And I know she's right. The mirror cabinet is upside down, and we're going to have to do that whole process over again. And it was that lesson that taught me that having a home was not worth it and was not for me. Until I had kids. And I realized how hard it is to tell a 2-year-old and explain to a 2-year-old that our 80-year-old landlady does not appreciate him running in the hallway. Quiet feet, Laith, quiet feet. It's hard to explain that. And it's hard to deal with our landlady coming up to us and saying, what's going on up there? And not having a space of our own, having to deal with this. And we're finally in a financial position, and my wife is saying, Adnan, we need to find a house. We can make it work financially. I can't live like this anymore. I want a garden. I want a space to tend to. I want a place to call our own. Rent is just going to continue to go up. And so I bite the bullet. After a bit of back and forth of me trying to convince her out of it, as usual, she wins. We start looking for a house. And alhamdulillah, Allah blesses us to get a house about a year and a half ago, alhamdulillah. So we get this house, and by this time, I've become adjusted to the idea. I'm become adjusted to the idea of being a homeowner. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to be a man now. A man of a house. I want to learn how to do things in the house, like turn on the radiators and empty the dehumidifier, do manly things, right? Little did I know what this house had in store for me. You see, we had a professional home inspector come through, look at all the issues, explain what was going on before we bought the house, as is good practice to do. So he showed us everything, took a look at the wiring and the heating system and everything, told us exactly what the issues were. We knew we had to do a bit of work, but it was manageable. And my wife convinced me, against my will, that we both knew the kitchen needed remodeling, and we wanted a half bath on the first floor. There was only one bathroom in the house, and we knew having guests that would be hard, and so we wanted to add a half bath. I was convinced, let's just stay in the house, let's get used to it. In a year or two, we'll take a break with family, we'll get that construction done while we're away, we'll come back. And she says, Adrian, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. You can't do construction while you're away. We need to get this done. We need to still rent for a few months and get this renovation done. So she finally convinces me to do this renovation project, completely redo the kitchen. And as we strip down the kitchen, we start realizing the real issues in the house. All of the gutters need to be replaced. They're clogged up. Guess who has to do that? I had to learn how. The structural beam, which the home inspector noted, looks like you might have had like some beetles in the beam at some point. Oh, okay, beetles, that's something that they come and then they go, I should have a professional look at it eventually, the inspector said, but yeah, mashallah. Little did I know that the first third of the one structural beam that holds up this whole house has been hollowed out by termites. Oh, that's exciting. That needs to be done. Got to figure out some friend to consult to help me replace a whole structural beam in my house. And what happens when we got the kitchen? Well, we see the real state of the wires. You see the wires in the house, except for one single circuit going to the second floor bathroom, which is what convinced the home inspector that everything was updated in terms of the wiring. Other than that one circuit, all of the wiring in the house is knob and tube. Does anyone know here what knob and tube is? I had no idea what knob and tube. Oh, that sounds quaint. Knob and tube. Let me look that up. What is knob and tube? Oh, well, it's the kind of wiring that, if you're not careful, could burn your whole house down. Oh, how quaint. Look at this nice little New England house we got. Ha! Ooh. Okay. And we did not have tens of thousands of dollars lying around, especially since we'd put everything we could into the down payment on the house. So guess what I had to learn? I had to learn how to do electrical. Here's the proof. This is a picture I took for the good graces of the city inspector, the electrical inspector, to show him that, yes, it was my work. That, yes, I passed it off as my work, even though this friend of mine who is a master electrician may have done certain elements of that work, such as changing the whole meter box outside and other dangerous things that I may or may not have wanted to injure myself doing. But overall, I designed the whole electrical layout for the house. Every single wire in that house is replaced, except for one single wire going from one single low voltage wire going from the boiler up to the thermostat. Other than that, every single wire in the house is new. Designed by me. And much of that done by me because I had to learn how to do it. And guess what that experience was like? Exactly, not just uncomfortable. I have never tasted such a deep sense of failure as much as I did during that time in my life. If you were here for the khutbah that I gave on Friday, was that just yesterday? Wow, it feels so long ago. MashaAllah. If you're here for the khutbah, you heard me tell the story of just this past week doing home projects. Home projects is the way that Allah gets me to taste a deep sense of personal failure. Failure as a man. Why can't I take care of this? Why don't I know this? Why can't I connect the circuit right? So I'll tell you, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but one day I spent a whole Saturday. So our garage, which is behind the house, it did not have power. We needed to give it power. We needed at least a garage door opener and some lights in there and some plugs. And so I had to rent a trencher from Home Depot. So I rented that trencher. We trenched a hole down through the backyard to put some PVC piping in and run a circuit out through there. We laid all the piping. My friend Isaiah, the master electrician, had helped me lay that piping. Now it was up to me just to get some wire down into the piping. I spent 6 hours trying to feed a 12-gauge wire down through that PVC piping, pushing it through, crying at moments, why can't I do this? Ya Allah. Let me try again. Pull it all out. Keep pushing it down. Keep pushing it down. Always, I know I get about a half to a 2/3 of the way through, and then it sticks on something inside that pipe, and it's not going any further. Allah, Allah, Allah. Okay, let me try that. 6 hours. Isaiah shows up the next weekend. I say, Isaiah, I can't get it. You said I could just get the wire through. I'm not able to do it. And he says, Adnan, you take a bag. Take a plastic bag. Put some string on the end of that plastic bag. You stuff the plastic bag in the hole. Then you put a vacuum on the other side. And you start the flipping vacuum. Only he didn't say flipping. That's just one example of how I feel like a complete moron. I feel like such a sense of failure. I was able to do in 6 minutes, after hearing a few words from Isaiah, what I'd spent 6 hours trying to do. Failure after failure after failure. But what comes from that failure? Experience and a lot of success ultimately. Because now, what's happened in the past year? Well, I helped wire my kitchen. It took a lot of work. Getting all those wires in the right place, planning it all out, dealing with the inspector. I failed the first inspection on this. He said I had to put these special green gaskets around all the boxes on external facing walls. Okay, I ordered the green gaskets, I got them on. But eventually, finally, the approval notice came. I passed inspection, passed inspection, passed inspection. And then what was I able to do? I was able to help others. My mother got her retirement dream home, a farm in Wisconsin, and they wanted to redo some work, and she said, could you redo the electrical in our living room? And I said, sure, I'd love to do it. Now I love this kind of thing. I'll do that. So I was able to help her and her fiancé with that. I was able to help my friend Muhammad, whose electrician ditched on him before they installed the oven, and I was able to get that hooked up for him. Connect the wire in the box, connect it behind the oven as well. And so what I learned from that experience and what Allah had me taste through that deep experience of failure is this lesson. You never truly fail when you learn to embrace failure. It's a part of the human experience. We're meant for it. Allah has made us for this. You never truly fail when you learn to embrace that failure. Some of us might be familiar with Thomas Edison's advice on this. It was credited with inventing electricity, saying specifically, if I found 10,000 ways something won't work, I haven't failed. Every wrong attempt discarded is just one more step forward. At the very least, you learn experience. You gain something. Also, there's an economist, Tim Harford, who wrote a book, Adapt, Why Success Always Starts with Failure. He analyzes businesses in the modern Western world and says that the businesses which are really successful are those that have understood how to embrace failure. And how he speaks about business also applies directly to how we approach our lives too. He says the recipe for successfully adapting is to try new things, make failure survivable, and make sure that you know when you failed so that you can correct and learn from it. But of course, we don't need fancy economists or Thomas Edison to teach us something that we already can see in the Quran, such as in the story of Sulaiman. It's interesting, this story always fascinated me, because when Allah talks about trying Sulaiman, He says, وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا سُلَيْمَانَ, and then a few ayahs later, ثُمَّ أَنَابَ قَالَ رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَهَبْ لِي مُلْكًا لَا يَنبَغِي لِأَحَدٍ مِّن بَعْدِي إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ. So Sulaiman is tested, and he learnt something. He repented. Now, obviously, we understand what is right for our prophets here. That prophets, we believe, don't make sins, but they make mistakes in the sense of things that they do and then realize they could have done something better. And Sulaiman, this is one of the times in which Sulaiman experiences this. And then he says, my Lord, forgive me. And then what? And bestow upon me a dominion, the like of which no one after me will have, for you are indeed the ultimate bestower. This always fascinated me because Suleiman knows he's done something he could have done better. Anab, he turns back, he repents, and then he asks for a huge kingdom because he, as a prophet, knows that failure is an immense opportunity. Failure, as we mentioned in the khutbah yesterday, is often an invitation from Allah. It's often actually an indication from Allah of His closeness to us and His love for us when He tests us, when He makes us fail. And it's often in those moments, those are actually blessed moments, the right moments to make dua. We see a similar thing actually with Musa alayhi salam. After he takes the life of the man and is scared over his state, he makes intense dua at that moment. He says, Rabbi, bima an'amta alayya. He talks about his state and asks for forgiveness, but then says, bima an'amta alayya. He says, in that you have bestowed upon me a great blessing, I will not be amongst the wrongdoers. He sees that experience of failure and then repentance of the failure, from the failure, as a great blessing from Allah. Not a sign of His anger, not a sign of His displeasure or something like that. So, how do we make that return? Well, there are 4 steps to embrace failure, which we get from our guidance of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the first step, well, really the pre-step, step number 0, is to figure out for once what kind of embrace of this failure is it. There's an embrace of failure which is going to be in regards to, does our sense of failure actually come from one of our foes? Were we living according to our why, and then something unexpected happened, and now our foes step in, try to poison the well and say, you shouldn't have even tried. You shouldn't have done that. Was it really a failure? We need to ascertain that, because if it was, then there's an embrace of that failure that needs to happen in terms of welcoming. I know I did the right thing. Yeah, the circumstances didn't work out. Maybe I have to make a few excuses here and there, but I know deep down I was living according to my why, and I'm not going to let the poison of my foes infect me by telling me, no, you should have, you shouldn't have stepped up and tried to defend that brother because then you got hit in the face too. Look at that. No, it was right of you to stick up for that brother who needed help. It was right of you to do that difficult thing. So the first step is understanding what kind of embrace. Do we need to realize that we feel a sense of failure because of some poison from our foes? Or is it a true wave of regret coming? That we actually need to be regretful, we've made a mistake and need to rectify for it. And that kind of embrace is like a jiu-jitsu embrace. You hug the guy and you choke him behind the back. We want to eliminate that. So what kind of embrace do we want? So after we've found out what kind of embrace we want, then if it does have to do with regret, with a wave of regret, then the first step is feeling that regret, feeling that remorse, sitting with that feeling of, wow, I messed up. It sounds simple, but it's actually very hard to do. We want to move on to something else. We want to go some other place, either start defending ourselves. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm okay. No, I think you had the issue. We don't want to sit in that white-hot fire, as one of my teachers, Osama Khan, rahimahullah, would talk about in terms of what we experience often in life, that white-hot fire of the raw emotion of remorse. That's hard. It's hard to sit with, but that's the first step. We really have to feel that. That's going to propel us forward. Step number 2 is to get out of the quicksand. We have to stop doing that thing that we're doing wrong if we're still involved in it. That's one of the essential steps of learning from failure. We don't just acknowledge we've done something wrong. If we're continuing to do it, we have to stop it right now. Then we have to look ahead and think, what could this failure represent as a barrier for me in the future, and how can I intend never to do this again? I'm going to climb that wall. When I fall into the same kind of circumstance, I'm not going to make the same mistake again. I'm committing to that. And then finally, Step number 4, if we're carrying a burden, if the mistake that we've made involves transgressing the rights of others, we have to return those rights. If we took something that wasn't ours, we hurt a reputation that we shouldn't have hurt, we have to rectify that. These are the 4 steps of dealing with failure from our prophetic tradition, which the Prophet ﷺ teaches us. He teaches us ultimately how to do tawbah, right? This is where we get it. These are the 4 steps of tawbah. And as we hear in the hadith from him, he says, an-nadmu tawbah. An-nadmu tawbah. Nadm in Arabic being regret, a sense of sorrow, sadness that we did that thing. He said that's the an-nadmu tawbah. Regret is tawbah because that's the foundation of it. That's why that's step 1. And we often want to jump into the action first, but we have to feel that remorse first in order for this tawbah really to work. We have to step into that feeling, let ourselves feel that pain, and then the other steps happen. And if it's helpful, one of the ways that's always helped me to remember all these steps too is when it comes to tawbah, thinking about past, present, and future. So in regards to the past, I regret what I did. In regards to the present, I stopped doing what I'm doing right now. And then in regards to the future, I intend never to do it again. So when we're serious about our relationship with Allah, serious about developing on the spiritual path and following our why and really purifying our hearts to be that full vessels of our pure why, we do need to go through a certain process. But there are things that hold us back from doing that process. So once again, returning to the book of Tim Harford on this subject, he puts forth that there are 3 things that we tend to do when we have to face mistakes that are hard to admit. So number 1 is just denial, as we mentioned. Oh, no, that wasn't a mistake. No, I meant to do that. Or no, it's your problem. Yeah, it's not mine. All right, that's number 1 thing that we very easily fall into as humans. Number 2 is loss chasing. This term came from people who studied gamblers and gambling addiction. This is what gamblers do. When they lose, when they fail and lose that money, often what someone who has a problem with gambling does is say, but I'm going to win next time. So rather than embrace that failure and say, wow, I lost that $200, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this again. I'm stopping now while I still have some money in the bank. That gambler who has an issue is doing loss chasing. He's going to say, no, I need to get that money back. I'm going to put in $300 this time because I really think I'm going to win this time, right? Alhamdulillah, Allah has made it explicit that gambling is prohibited for us, but we get into this addictive behavior ourselves when we make a mistake and then try to make up for it, like me putting a hole in a wall in my house where I shouldn't have put one, and like, well, maybe if I put a hole next to it, it'll look more like a pattern, and it's not going to be so distracting, so let me put a second hole in the wall, and I just make things worse, right? That's lust chasing. Number 3, hedonic editing. Hedonic editing is when we think back to that experience and we try to convince ourselves why it's not a failure. We try to say, well, okay, that was maybe the wrong thing to do, but the reason I was doing it was for this other thing to happen, and so that other thing justifies me doing that thing I shouldn't have done. We're labeling the failure actually as a success and saying, oh, yeah, I meant to put that hole in the wall because I wanted to see what wires were potentially behind that. Yeah. No. We just have to do the hard work of embracing it. So these are 3 common things that come up in our human psychology that prevent us from embracing failure. And so when we're serious about the spiritual path and embracing our journey to Allah, we need to go through and think, when we do fail, either own it or atone for it. Right? Which one is it? Are we feeling like a failure because of our foe's poisons? In which case we own that failure. Bismillah, yeah, I'm messed up because I'm learning in the pursuit of my why. Or do we atone for it? No, I did actually mess up. That was the wrong thing for me to do, and I need to make up for it. And it's helpful then for us to think through our lives and think, if we haven't done a process like this yet, this can be an important part of our spiritual development. Thinking about, are there things that still sit on our conscience that we haven't yet embraced? And how can I go through these steps? I did this a few years ago and realized there are a few things on my conscience, such as thinking as a 6-year-old in 1994 when I was in a store and took the last Power Rangers stickers, and the boy behind me wanted Power Rangers stickers for his sticker album, and the store owner had to tell him there are no stickers left, and I saw that boy and I knew I had the stickers in my hand, and I have felt the pain ever since. For some reason that stuck with me. So in just trying to empty my heart of this and think, I just had to think, okay, did I regret that? Yeah, I regret that. It wasn't right for me to take those stickers when that boy couldn't have had it. You know, as a 6-year-old, of course, I was learning, but still, that stuck in my mind. Have I stopped doing it? Yeah, I intend. I don't take Power Ranger stickers from the store anymore, I guess. Maybe not so applicable for this one, but I at least checked. Is my intention never to do that again? Yeah. And have I made amends? Well, I can't really find that other 6-year-old boy. It must be in his 30s right now. But what can we do when, question for you, actually. What can we do when we've potentially wronged someone and there is no way for us to repay them? What are some ideas? What can we do? Make dua for them, yeah. What else? You can try to pay it forward, do some good to someone else, right? Yeah. And then there's something else which sometimes our spiritual scholars mention too. Anyone know? Charity in particular. Any kind of good deed or charity that we do saying, Ya Allah, I want the reward of this charity to go to that person and not to me. Because at the end of the day, we're taught that anyone we've wronged in this world, we have to answer to them in the next life. Allah can forgive us all of the sins we have between Him and us. But when it comes to the sins with other people, He's taught us, and our beloved Prophet ﷺ taught us, that Allah is not going to necessarily erase that. We have to answer to the other people. They have to be satisfied with us. And so they get to take from our good deeds until they're satisfied on the Day of Judgment. And if we don't have any good deeds left, what do they get to do? Anyone know? Exactly. They get to say, here, take some of my sins and put this on your record. We got to take care of it before we lose the chance. So I tried to give a little bit of sadaqah on behalf of that boy. I'll do that. Not to say that I necessarily had to do tawbah for that, but I felt the nadam. I knew that regret was there. I knew I needed to face it. I did the same with professor of Arabic in my first year of college, Professor Abu Ali. I learned that Arabs tend to be addressed by their first names and not their last names, but it was at Dartmouth College, and I called her Diana, which is just awkward, and I regretted that, and so I actually apologized to her for that. I reestablished connection. Turns out she works for a library in Palestine now, and so I reached out to her and said, do you remember this incident when I such and such? And she said, I have no recollection of that. And I said, well, I'm still sorry. That was bad adab of me. And I told you, I might have mentioned before, I, in college, was a problem student, often picking issues with people running things. And so I tried to reach out to them and make amends after that because, as you heard my story, if you heard the beginning of this talk at 3 o'clock today, I found myself on the other end of that table a few years later. And so that's the process that we go through. Because when we never truly fail, when we learn to embrace failure. Now, question for you. What if you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again? What happens then? What do we do? Do we give up? Is that a raising of the hand, sister, or are you just playing with the pen? Okay. Playing with the pen. Yeah, bismillah. Make tawbah? Every time, make tawbah. Right. This is an important thing to remember. The Prophet ﷺ is reported as saying, أَفْضَلُ الْعِبَادَةِ انتظار الفرج. Waiting for relief is the most virtuous act of worship. Now, as we heard in the Fajr Das today by Imam Jan, may Allah preserve him, the Prophet ﷺ would often say these kind of things in different contexts. This is the best kind of worship, that's the best kind of worship. It's always contextualized, but at the very least, we know there's a huge reward to failing and failing and failing and staying in the game. Waiting for that moment, Ya Allah, I've made the same mistake again, but I still have a good opinion of you, that you can still change my heart, and I'm going to make tawbah, I'm going to intend not to do it again, but if I do it again, if I end up falling back, I'm still coming back to you. That's a huge form of worship. Stay in the game. Hassan al-Basri, a key scholar from the second or third generation of our Ummah, was asked one time, he was asked by a man who came to him and said, does one of us not hate to keep falling in the same sin again and again and again? Isn't that a sign of something bad going on? Isn't that a sign of something, we're destined for something really bad? If we keep falling into the same sin again and again and again. What was his response? وَدَّ الشَّيْطَانُ لَوْ ظَفَرَ مِنْكُمْ بِهَذِهِ فَلَا تَمَلُّوا مِنَ الْإِسْتِغْفَارِ. Satan would love to win you over to that mentality. Thinking that if you keep failing and keep failing and keep failing, that there's something wrong with you and you just need to give up. Never tire of seeking forgiveness. And so want to end this lesson with once more a bit of discussion. Let's have some discussion in those small groups again. And then once we're done with the discussion, I'll invite, if anyone has some insights to share, to try to think about, okay, all this that I presented on how to approach failure, how might this weaken your foes and strengthen your why and your how? All right, let's take, say, 4 minutes for this. Bismillah. Okay, let's hear maybe from, maybe 1 or 2 brothers, and then we'll head to 1 or 2 sisters, inshallah, if anyone does want to share. What were some of the things that came up? Anyone want to share?
So one of my takeaways from this, I think it's so powerful to see the tawbah, the 4 steps. As human beings, I think we quickly go through them, where it makes us like, here's the possibility to go through the mistake again. So we don't really sit and feel the nadam, maybe based on our own securities, that we don't really want to sit there and feel it.
Yeah, especially as men.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to deal with feelings, yeah.
So yeah, and the other reflection is like, when you talk about like regret, how I think modern society teaches, and unfortunately some modern secular speakers be like, never regret anything in your life. Like, wait, how are we teaching that to the young? It's like, we have to regret things to become better people. So that's my reflection from all this.
Okay, mashallah, jazakallah, thank you. Yeah, one more brother wants to share with us. No more insights? All right, bismillah.
Well, this is not about insights, but it's more about your presentation overall. I'm just showing my appreciation, how much I appreciate it. As a Muslim, I mean, in my 35 years of life, I've been to many places. Especially when it comes to our Islamic communities, the lectures, Islamic lectures and everything. Usually it's just like the speaker pulls off a verse from the Quran or pulls off a hadith and starts giving us basically the tafsir of it. That's pretty much most of the lectures are like. I've been to many churches, and I've been sitting with the pastors and see how they do, and they bring up real life experiences, just like you are putting something from your life. And when people do that, it's I feel like we feel connected. I mean, our lives, we feel the connection. Like the same thing is happening to me, right? These kind of things.
Mm.
I always felt like in our Islamic lectures and everything, we have that part missing. We just pull off everything from the scriptures, not from our own lives. So when something, always connected to the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and everything. But I feel like something is missing always because we are not connecting to our lives, like practical real life examples that is happening in our life, what's going on. So your presentation is very illustrative. I felt like it relates to my life, it was speaking to me personally. And so in my 35 years, this is the first time I'm seeing this. So you have been amazing on this one. May Allah bless you. That's one thing. And the second thing is the mental health part. When I go to TikTok or Instagram, I see I go for mental health advocacies. All these pastors are coming up, and they give some mental health advices and everything. So I feel like in our Muslim community, we should be doing that mental health advocacies. Our scholars and doing these things, everything. Not from like you're bringing Simon Sinek. I follow him like in every single his every single content. There are many more of them. So again, it's always about our Prophet ﷺ, and this is good. This is good. We have strict, but I think like you have not confined yourself into that just not a little, but I mean that specific part. So you're bringing Simon Sinek, for example, in this. I think that is amazing.
Okay, mashallah. Well, thank you. Well, yeah, maybe building off of that, yeah, maybe in seeing some of the effectiveness of content like this, maybe one of you or many of you in this gathering will be inspired in terms of figuring out maybe this is part of my why, learning how to connect the Quran with personal life experience and really allowing the whole community, whole humanity to benefit in this way. One or two sisters, if anyone wants to share, Bismillah. That's all right.
So my group, we basically discussed the importance of using like how this is just like a journey of self-discovery where we focus on strength, resilience, growth, and well-being. And so by basically focusing on all of those things, you focus on yourself, how can you grow and evolve, and by looking at the future, just looking at that growth and whatnot, you're not allowing your foes to have such control and hold on you. Like you have this emotional maturity and all this other stuff. So.
Okay, thank you for sharing, sister. Appreciate it. Any other sister, or shall we move on? Okay, Bismillah. Well, thank you, all three of you, for sharing. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, mashallah. So, our time is running to a close. I've thrown a lot at you. This last thing we were talking about, when you fail, either own it or atone for it because, well, and yes, or get your buddy on the phone for it. Right? I forgot I added that in for myself. How many times I had to consult friends when I put a hole in the wall where I wasn't supposed to and didn't know how to patch it. But a quick review of where we've been going today. So we had this recap at first at 3 o'clock for those of you who are with us about what it means to define our why and why that's important, who those enemies are looking to take that why from us, then how we also protect that why from our enemies and from ourselves falling into it by defending our well-being with our hows and all those habits, the different bricks in the wall around that why well that would protect our why. And then we talked about how to address failure and those steps of tawbah and how to really make sure that we've gone about them and assessing our lives in that way. Prophetic guidance in that regard. And so I know I've thrown a lot at you. You might be wondering, well, what about the rest of the material? If you are interested in the rest of the material, feel free to go to fightforyourwhy.com. Inshallah, soon we'll be starting an email newsletter with weekly wisdom on this topic. There's a Y muscle strength test that you can take to see how strong are your Y muscles, how able are you to defend your Y in a quick quiz that gives a certain sense of it. And the hope, as I mentioned yesterday, the hope is that these resources, inshallah, will be turned into a book eventually, and maybe some online courses or that kind of thing. If you'd ever want to invite me back, I'd love to be here. It's been a huge blessing for me to be here, being able to benefit from the companionship of all of you and this beautiful, inspirational masjid. So don't shy away from asking a brother back, mashallah. But right now, if you do really feel, if you're in the place basically where I was a few years ago, feeling like I needed this material, I needed to sort things out, I'd reached that pressure point of now I got kids in the house, I can't beat around the bush anymore, I need to figure out how not to coast anymore in life. Right now, the main resource we have is a coaching program. So I just mentioned that in case that's beneficial at all. But as I did last night, I want to end on a story. This is a story of this minbar right here. This picture was taken in the early decades of the 20th century. Unfortunately, this minbar is no longer here. This picture was taken of where this minbar ended up. But when this minbar was first constructed, it was constructed somewhere far away from where it ended up. It was constructed in Aleppo, in Syria. And it was constructed there. A number of carpenters of the time, this was several centuries ago, constructed this minbar and put years of effort into this minbar. And once they were done, that minbar sat or stood in the masjid of Aleppo for 20 years. It wasn't the minbar of that masjid. That masjid already had a minbar, but it was in the masjid complex, just there. And people would pass by it. Travelers would come and see this ornate minbar, see all of the intricate elements of carpentry that went into it, all of the inlay of pearls and various materials, all the time, years of life that went into constructing this minbar. Several skilled master carpenters spending years of their life working on this minbar. People would come to Halab and say, well, this minbar isn't clearly the minbar for this masjid, it's in the courtyard. What's it doing here? And they will be told, this minbar is for al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Now at that time, the Masjid al-Aqsa was under occupation. It was the time of the Crusades. Crusaders occupied Jerusalem. And it was a man, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, who grew up in Halab, seeing that minbar and having that drive and inspiration from that, as well as the inspiration of his uncle, Nuruddin Zengi, who attempted to re-establish Muslim authority over the Holy Land in Jerusalem. That inspired him to then go and conquer Jerusalem, take it back from the Crusaders, and establish just rule for almost a millennium after him of Muslims in that land. Now it's interesting, if you were to look at that minbar, you might think, if you visited there during that time, this minbar sitting for 20 years in Halab, why did the carpenters waste their time with this? What are they doing? Spending their life... Okay, so it's a minbar for a Masjid al-Aqsa. Well, if you want to liberate al-Aqsa, why not just go fight? Just go fight the Crusaders. Do something with your life. You're carving bits of wood to make a minbar. But those carpenters understood something very powerful. They understood that Allah did not create them to fight. Maybe it was their abilities, their circumstances, their physical condition. Maybe it was just the circumstances of the time. It wasn't the right time for the Muslims to assemble to reassert proper Islamic authority over that land. But they understood that they had a mission. And when they stuck to their mission, and stood on that and stayed focused on their why, becoming master carpenters and using that craft, spending years and years and years crafting this thing, they became an inspiration for the people who eventually did liberate Al-Aqsa. And this is how our why works. You have to figure it out for yourself. You have to do that deep work, do the difficult work, often delving through regret and mistakes and messing up and getting thrown on your back and laid out on a exercise bench at Physique with Malik. You have to do that difficult work to find it. And it's important you don't stop, because people are depending on you. The children of Gaza, may Allah give them relief. They're depending on you to do something deep with your life that's going to make a difference in this world. The people of Sudan are depending on you to do something in this world. Your family is depending on you. But above all, you are depending on you. Because at the end of the day, we all end up with nothing. We all end up alone and face to face with Allah. It's just going to be you and Him. That's it. And He's going to ask you. He's going to start asking you. He's going to say, I gave you these abilities. And I gave you these interests. And what did you do with them? And we're going to say, yeah, I know that, Allah. You gave us those interests. You gave me those interests and those abilities and this experience. But, I tried these things and I faced some setbacks in this way. I messed up so many times. And Allah will say, yeah, I gave you that too. That was all part of the package. That was part of your training. That was part of your experience as well. What did you do with it? Did you dig deep down and find that well? Or did you let someone else prevent you from that? Something else inside of you or outside of you prevent you from that. And so given that it's almost 6 o'clock, this is the part of the lecture where I'm supposed to end with a dua. But sometimes, we tend to outsource our spirituality in the community. Let's have the Shaykh up front make dua. I'll just say Ameen in my heart. No, this is the time for you to make dua. Let's take a moment. Let's make dua individually. I'm not going to do it for you this time. آمين 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 وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا. If I've said anything that's beneficial today, it is simply because of the benefit I've received from my teachers, and anything that I've said that is silly or rubbed you the wrong way or is just completely false, that's me. And please forgive me for it and let me know afterwards, okay? So thank you once again for having me, and جزاكم الله خيرا. الحمد لله.